Time for us to have our environmentally sound segment of the day, and Mendy Harlow from the Pacific Northwest Salmon Center is here. She's the executive director. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. How are
Good
you?
to see you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course.
Saturday, Stephanie and I went out for our Union River Summer Chum Trapping count, and boy, we had a heck of a lot of fun out there. Not many fish this time. We just had 5, but the week before it sounded like there were some huge numbers. We're just past the halfway point, right?
Mm-hmm. We are, yeah.
How are things looking there for the Union River?
Great. So we have had 3,486 fish pass through as of 8 o'clock this morning.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're just past the halfway point in the count. So
Very cool.
Today's the 18th of September, so we have another about 30 days left that we'll be counting fish there, and we're well beyond halfway of where we were last year. So we're expecting, somewhere a little bit over last year's count. So
good.
It's kind of remarkable because 3 years ago we had the 2015 drought, and that drought definitely impacted the summer chum run. And so, we could have had much higher counts this year had we not had that drought 3 years ago.
We were talking about that in the news earlier this morning, how that is also affecting some of the other runs and rivers around the whole rest of the state.
Yeah.
So we are there on the Union River, and the types of fish that come in and came when we were there, we saw a couple 3 chum and a couple 2 Chinook, and it was very cool to see.
Yeah.
Describe to folks the types of fish that do come up, back up, and get stuck there in the trap before we get counting them and get them out for back to work.
Typically we'll see 3 species of salmon there. So we'll see the summer chum that we see every year. We'll see occasionally Chinook, and so those are typically hatchery Chinook that have kind of strayed from other rivers. So they don't necessarily belong there, but they kind of are finding their way around. So salmon typically have a certain percentage of strays that go to other rivers just in case there's some sort of natural disaster or catastrophe on their home river. They kind of do that to kind of spread the diversity around. So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket or all their eggs in one river system.
Sure.
Interesting.
And for folks who, when they hear the word chum, a lot of people may think of, chumming the waters or throwing the fish out there to try to get the bigger fish. But describe what that means for you when you hear the word chum.
Yeah, so chum are, the species of salmon that come back the earliest into our river system, so especially summer chum. So they're actually the fish that do help feed the other fish. So they help feed the coho that spend years in the river. Sometimes they'll spend actually 2 whole summers before they outmigrate. So they're bigger fish when they leave. Chum are not. They're little tiny fish as they leave. But the parents of those little itty-bitty fish actually stick around in the rivers after they die for many months, and so they actually feed those fish that hang out for many years in the streams. So it's funny that word chumming, like as you're throwing carcasses into the water to catch fish, that word was probably derived from, chum salmon. So chum are actually feeding other species of fish. So bugs also feed on those chum that are in the river, and so those bugs feed, also the juveniles throughout the summer. So yeah, it's so to me, chum are super important.
Nature.
It's amazing out there.
Amazing.
You got to get out there.
Dude, I know. I'm looking at chum right now, too.
There are some open volunteer slots
There
tonight,
are.
for sure, too.
So for me, chum are really important. They're probably the most important fish to our ecosystem because of the nutrients that they provide every year from the ocean. And they come back in such large quantities historically, and they typically spawn in the lower, 4 or so miles of the river, and just really provide a great influx of nutrients to a very nutrient-poor system by that time. So last time any given river may have seen any spawners was maybe January or February. So it has gone through a major nutrient drought throughout the spring and the summertime. So they're a super important fish to our ecosystem.
So when you're out there at the Union River, there is an area right now cordoned off in the river for spawning. Now, I know that doesn't happen at all places. So for folks who may be out exploring, what do we need to remember to keep the areas as pristine as possible as the fish are are doing their thing here. What can you look for, or is it just best practices to stay out of the rivers unless you're a trained professional or volunteer?
In general, yes, it's the best practice to stay out of the river, but in general, a red will look like a kind of a divot in the river bottom. So basically the gravel will be cleaner in that spot because the fish come along and the females come along and use their tail to dig their nest or their red. So it'll be a large kind of bowl in the river that's cleaner rock, and so that's in general what it looks like. But yeah, it's definitely best practice to stay out of the rivers because a lot of times there will be so many fish that have spawned in there that a lot of the gravel will look the same.
Yeah.
And so you won't see that clean gravel. It's, typically early in the season that you'll see that cleaner gravel. So
the other thing too is make sure that your pets stay out of there.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of times what we see on, especially the Union River, is a lot of dogs will go into the stream and scare fish off the reds or even kind of attack the fish. And actually, for dogs to eat raw salmon like that, it's not necessarily good for them either.
Sure.
So yeah, the dogs scare the fish off the reds, and it's definitely not a good thing.
One question that somebody came when they were coming to visit asked is, if the female is there on her side and kind of flopping the stuff around, getting ready to release the eggs there,
Yeah.
and the male comes along to do what he needs to do there, how
Very
do
well put,
how do these two fish connect? The question was, do they meet out in the ocean and decide to come back to the Union River? Do they come back to my river? Have they always both come back to the Union River? Are they connected, or is it just opportunity?
So typically they don't meet out in the ocean and come back to the river together. They meet in the river. So they were both typically fish that were, hatched in that river. And then they outmigrate, get big, and come back, and then meet in the river. So females are really looking for very fit males, attractive males that have, all of the look to them that a strong salmon would have.
No.
But what you'll see sometimes too is actually you'll see smaller males come in and also spawn with that female at the same time. They kind of sneak in, and that's also very important to the genetics of the species long term, because there are some times when nature selects for smaller fish, and so having some of the offspring from that river system be a smaller fish is beneficial. So those smaller fish are also important.
I know that this river is very important in the Mason County area and with the Salmon Center, but how does it relate to other streams and rivers throughout the rest of the state? And do you share your information with the rest of the state? And have you heard the same kind of comeback numbers as you have in the Union?
Right. So we do share all the information that we collect at our trap with the State Department of Fish and Wildlife. So really, the Union River is important to Hood Canal specifically because it makes up part of the West Kitsap Ecological Diversity Group of the Hood Canal Summer Chum, which is a threatened species. And so we have a recovery plan. And that recovery plan calls for recovery of not just the Union River population, but also some of the west side diversity group and on the north end too. And so that Union River stronghold really helps boost the West Kitsap Ecological Diversity Group of Summer Chum. So it's important for recovery of the Tahuya River, which we've also been in the past supplementing that run, and we're looking forward to resupplementing the Dewado River as well as possibly Big Beef, but we'll work with the co-managers of the fish for those decisions in the future. If you're listening to this and you want to get involved, there are openings to be on the Union River to count these fish, and after a real brief tutorial from the previous volunteer, they have all the documentation so you can see the fish, and after a little while you really get, it kind of comes naturally after a minute or two. So there are some opportunities. There is a slot in the 5 to 10 shift, and then the overnight tonight you can
go to the Salmon Center's website, pnwsalmoncenter.org. Look for the latest posts section, volunteers needed for summer chum trapping, and you get in on the Sign Up Genius link there to do this. There are opportunities, but not many left. These are always, they fill up quick. And it's really important, the volunteers. I mean, this is 3 months, 24 hours a day you're out there.
It's 2 months, yeah.
2 months.
Wow.
It's mid-August through mid-October. So, yeah, it's 2 months. And, gosh, I mean, we have so many visitors visiting the trap site. You mentioned that you had some folks stop by and ask questions. Last year, we had over 1,000 visitors, just people coming in, asking questions. And so it's a really important part of our education, honestly, helping people understand why chum are important, why fish are important, don't step on the reds. And it's really neat to have so many volunteers involved because they're taking ownership of that trap for 4 hours, 5 hours, however long they're there, and really helping spread the word for us.
And people sign up, and they sign up often and come back, and they come back year after year after they've done this once. I know that last year we did it, had a good time, and we did it one more time this past weekend, and very cool stuff. So we'll put the links to that in the show notes here. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for coming on to talk about this.
Very
it's a
educational.
fun program for sure.